Hello, and welcome to the premiere episode of Gold Coast After Dark. The title taken from the book of the same name, as you can see. The book written by none other than yours truly, Bill Parker. Just so you know, Gold Coast After Dark is dedicated to my humble literary output. So you won't be hearing me sing live or on a recording of any kind. So you're spared that. Now, the key word here is my. This isn't Oprah's book club or the New York Times bestsellers list, and we won't be talking about anyone else's work. So it is. Let them have their own video. As John Lennon once told a reporter who asked him about doing a story about John's then wife Cynthia, showing her view of the world being a Beatles wife, John said, "No bloody fear, I'm the bloody star here." And that's the way it works. Now, there will be readings from my books and commentary, go on after them. Because the story doesn't finish it just because it ends. You write it and you look back later and maybe you see things a bit differently. There's always that possibility, or you realize things that you didn't when you first came up with it. Um, so we might talk about that. Not today. This is just sort of a quick in and out. Um, but if anyone writes in, we may discuss that too. So I mean, if you send me an email or something through Messenger or carrier pigeon, you know, um, we'll read and discuss that, and you will be identified. I'll say this is from so and so, whoever so and so may be. Um, I won't give your email address or anything like that, but if you're gonna send it in, you gotta own it, man. That's the way it is. Now, the thing about that, because I'm not getting any younger, I'm not going to devote any time and energy to making your missives intelligible. So if you have difficulty pushing a noun against a verb or dealing with words of three or more syllables, it's not my problem. I mention this because I was once accused of intellectual grandstanding by using $5 words. Well, they were more like $2 words. Uh, but if you have trouble with them, all I can say is be glad that I'm the one on this side of the camera and not my friend Stanley Booth or the late Christopher Hitchens. And that about covers it. Um, as this is the premiere or pilot episode of this great undertaking, we're merely testing the waters, running up the flagpole to see who salutes, and so on. I'm going to read you just one item here, and we'll skip the commentary. We'll just go through it because we'll just see how it goes, and let me know what you think. The story is from an old book of mine, written when I still lived in Arizona, called "Walking Between the Winds." Okay. The story in question is called Gondary's Resolve. Here we go. Now it starts out with a little snippet of dialogue from an old movie. It starts out with a young woman named Gabrielle says, "Bose, have you ever been in love?" "No." "Have you ever said you were in love?" "Oh, sure, plenty of times." That bit of dialogue is from The Petrified Forest, starring Leslie Howard and Betty Davis, which is better known as the vehicle that introduced a fifth-billed Humphrey Bogart to the American public. Betty Davis plays Gabrielle Maple, a 20-ish reader of Francois Villon who dreams of living in France, while Leslie Howard plays Alan Squire, a doomed romantic hitchhiking across the country, looking for something to believe in, something worth living for and perhaps dying for, he says. Compared to the denizens of Black Mesa, Arizona, the worldly and eloquent Mr. Squire is like a visitor from another planet, and Gabrielle wastes no time. I don't make many mistakes in falling for him. Thanks to Gabrielle's vivacity, Alan begins to shake off some of the Weltschmerz he's carried around for a number of years. You have to pronounce German words like that. Even so, as Gabrielle visualizes scenarios in which they can be together, he smiles but knows better, despite his growing feelings for her and the promise of happiness in her visualizations. He's been around enough to know two people can be in love and yet not be right for each other, no matter how hard they try. Now, what about this Bose character? Where and how does he figure in? As portrayed by Dick Foran, Bose Hertzlinger is a former college football player. I should have been an All-American. Working at the gas station and cafe owned by Gabrielle's father, who still wears his old football jersey and splits his time between pumping gas, kicking a football around, and putting the make on Gabrielle. He's so full of himself as to be almost beyond belief. After confronting Gabrielle about her feelings towards him, "What's the matter, honey? Don't you like me?" And hearing her response, "No, not very much," he follows by assuring her she'll change her tune once I've had time to go into my act, which led to the exchange at the top of this segment. Three very different people with three very different views of love. To Bose, love is a series of hit-and-run missions whose success or failure rests on the level of acceptance his act receives from the current object of his desire. To Gabrielle, love is starry-eyed and laughing, full of promise, beauty, and dancing in the streets of Paris. To Alan, love may ultimately be something worth living for and perhaps dying for. But to date, it has proven to be both elusive and, when encountered, fleeting. What this reassures for yours truly is that the ancient Chinese axiom which tells us truth has many faces is in fact true. If that's the case, then are Gabrielle, Alan, and Bose equally correct in their definition of love, based on their dreams, expectations, and experiences? Is love, therefore, merely another example of the perception is reality school of thought, and not a many-splendored thing, or what, in fact, makes the world go round? One thing's certain, those are three decidedly Western points of view, and they do indeed make for a terrific story. But now, check this out. From the Mahabharata, a truly epic poem 15 times longer than the Bible, written in Sanskrit, and the source of the Bhagavad Gita, I can never pronounce that, comes the story of Gandhari, a beautiful young princess. As was the custom, while still a mere nubbin, arrangements were made for her to one day wed a prince from another royal family. Also in keeping with custom, neither member of the future royal couple had ever seen the other. When the big day finally arrived, Gandhari was in her room, adding a few last-minute touches to her already near-perfect looks, when a servant arrived, bearing less than good news. She had just seen Gandhari's future husband, and while he was indeed handsome, intelligent, and of noble bearing, he was also blind as a bat. Gandhari's initial response was, as you might expect from a pampered member of the ruling class, how could this be? Why was she never told? What was the use of having beautiful hair and skin, equally beautiful makeup and clothing, and luscious ruby-red lips, if her husband would never be able to see them? No doubt someone would even have to lead him to her in the bridal chamber that night. But then, in a change which would have seemed sudden on the road to Damascus, Gandhari became as calm as a summer's day and asked the servant to bring her a scarf. When the scarf was in her hands, she looked at her servant and said, "You are my last image of this world," and tied the scarf tightly over her eyes. "I will never take it off. Give me your hand and lead me to my husband. Now I can never reproach him for his misfortune." And she never did, nor did she ever remove her blindfold. She had never seen the prince, had never spoken with him, never so much as accidentally brushed her hand against his, and yet she performed an incredibly selfless act. But isn't that a characteristic of love, the performance of selfless acts? To be fair, Alan Squire also performs an incredibly selfless act in the final reel of The Petrified Forest, but I will say no more because you really ought to check that out for yourself. Once again, though, we need to ask, is there only one definition of love, or like truth, does it indeed have many faces? Well, so all right, there we are. Like I said, all very informal. I mean, look at this shirt, you know. Um, but this gives you an idea what it might be like. Hopefully, things will be more refined as time goes by. So, thank you for checking in. And for Gold Coast After Dark, in the immortal words of Taffy Lewis, see ya.